You would think Paris, being the city it will be an amazing place to invest in real estate because many tourists, good business city, loved by everybody. But unfortunately, I'm going to give you 10 reasons why I think you should keep out of the Paris real estate market. So let's get straight down to it. Point number one, Paris is in a real bubble at the moment when it comes to house prices. They've reached 10,500 euros per square meter, and that's an all-time high. And just to let you know how expensive it is, the price to income ratio has reached 15. So what does that mean? That means the average Parisian needs to work for 15 years to be able to afford to pay off an apartment. Now, this is much higher than New York, which stands around the 10 to 11 mark and is only behind Hong Kong when it comes to major cities. Number two, the gross yields are quite low. Typically in Paris, you'll get about 3.5% gross yield. Now, if you want to buy in the better areas, it's even lower. It's around 3%. In the not so good areas, you might get a bit more, 4%. But do you actually want to buy in these areas? Now, point number three, if you think the gross yields are low, the net yields make it even worse. So you pay quite a bit in things like building common charges, property tax, and maintenance charges. Just to give an idea, if you want to redo a bathroom in Paris, it will cost you probably up to a year's rental. Now that is a hell of a lot compared to a place like London, where you're looking at more or less 4 months. In Paris, you're looking at least 10 months to 12 months. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, when you've taken off all your expenses, the taxes are quite high as well. So tax on your rental yield, if you're an EU citizen, if you're buying from an EU country, is 27.5%. That's quite high. If you're buying from a non-EU country, it's even worse. It's 37.2%. So in effect, if you take into account that you may have 1 or 2 months where a year between tenants where you don't rent your property, you could theoretically be looking at almost 0% net yield. Number four, France is very pro-tenant. So if you want to rent out an apartment unfurnished, you're going to have to rent it out for at least 3 years. Furnished, it's 1 year. But the problem as well with France is it's quite difficult to evict a tenant. The laws are very pro-tenant and very onerous. Now, just to add a little bit of weight to this, in 2019, Paris introduced rent controls, which has made the situation even worse for a landlord. And another thing I have to say, what the government is doing as well, it's intending on to hold deposits into a centralized system, so you're not going to be in charge. It hasn't come through yet, but potentially as a landlord, you may not be in charge of your deposit. And I'm sure the French government will charge you money for holding the deposit in there. If you look at Airbnb as well, the maximum number of days you can do Airbnb in Paris is 120. Now, don't even think about doing more than that, because they have an army of people checking out if you're actually renting your Airbnb for a massive task force, if you're renting out for more than 120 days. And if you do, the fines, believe you me, are punitive, so don't even go there. Number five, high transaction costs. Now, you'll pay notary fees. This is on a second-hand building of more than 5 years. You'll typically pay 8% plus estate agent fees, which can range from anything. Normally they are about 10-11%, which are split between the buyer and seller. So it can be less than that, but normally as a purchaser you will pay around 3%. So on average, purchase cost for a second-hand property more than 5 years, you're going to pay 11%, which is quite high. Now, for off-plan properties and properties less than 5 years, it works like this. You have to pay stamp duty of 20% on top of the purchase price, although you will pay 5% less in notary fees, around 5% less compared to a buyer who buys an apartment, let's say in Paris, 5 years or more. But nevertheless, you will agree this is really a lot of money to pay. Now there are quite complicated ways of getting that VAT back if you're using the premises for commercial purposes, but you're going to have to do a lot of paperwork and look into that. If you actually want to make sure to get that VAT back, it's just not easy. Number 6. Now, this is an advantage of Paris. It's got a very, very high population density. In fact, amongst all the capitals in Europe, it's got the highest population density. But listen to this. Unfortunately, Paris's population has actually started to decline because the prices are so high, rents are so high, that people have been leaving the city. Between 2012 and 2017, there was actually a net migration of around 50,000 out of Paris. So prices being this high tells me this trend could continue, and that's not good for the real estate market. Number 7, the economy is not doing well in France. Even at the end of 2019, before COVID-19 came into being, the French economy had started to retract. So technically, they were in a technical recession at the end of 2019. Also, what you have to consider, the debt level is very high. So government debt to GDP before COVID-19 had already reached 98%. With COVID-19, this could go potentially to around 120%. So it's likely to end at 115 to 120%. That's very, very high. And that means taxes, which we'll come to in a minute, are not likely to go down. Number 8, Paris is run by socialists. And socialists, as you know, are not the friend of the real estate market. And when I mean socialists, they're very, very, Paris as a city is very, very socialistic. Now, I know many of you, it depends. I mean, a lot of you are socialists, a lot of you are capitalists, but whatever your point of view, this being the case, this is not going to help the Paris real estate market, especially if you're a foreign buyer. Now, point number 9 is the differential for mortgages. Now, in Paris, you can often get a 100% mortgage at a very, very low interest rate, fixed for a number of years. But as a foreign buyer, you'll be at a disadvantage. And why is that? Because more often than not, they will lend you only about 70%. So you'll have to put down about 30% deposit before being able to purchase the property. On top of that, you're likely to pay double the interest of a local in Paris. So if they're paying around 1%, you're likely to pay 2%. I never like that when there's a differential between the local and the foreign buyer. Number 10, which is also amazingly important, taxes. So we already had before the taxes on rental income, but if you look at other taxes in France, they are really, really, really quite frightening. Inheritance tax is 45%, so that's the third highest in the world. And just to add to, if you're buying to a problem that could happen with Paris, if you're buying a very expensive property over 1.3 million euros, you're going to be hit with a wealth tax. And what is strange about this is that if you do buy that property over 1.3 million euros, you're going to get hit with a wealth tax, which every year between 800,000 and 1.3 million, they'll charge you 0.5% on that portion. Above 1.3 million, they'll charge you 0.7%. And it actually goes further in stages. So if you buy a property over 10 million, you'll get charged to 1.3% over 10 million euros. Although that's, even in Paris, that's unlikely to happen. But if you're a particularly rich buyer, you have to take that into consideration. But for me, that further makes it a point against investing in the real estate market in Paris. And another tax, which I think is really, really very high, is the capital gains tax. Now, let's take this in two stages, because on the gains of property, you have like a capital gains tax and a social security tax. Now, the basic capital gains tax is 19%. So that's for both EU citizens and non-EU citizens. On top of this capital gains tax, and part of the capital gains tax is another tax. So if you make capital gains above 50,000, you're going to pay extra percentage. So over 50,000, it's 2%, but then it goes up even more in stages. So if you make a gain of over 260,000 euros, you're going to have to pay 6% on that portion. So there are stages in that, and I can do a further video on capital gains tax. But I'm sure you'll agree that that's a lot. Having said that, that's only the case if you sell within 5 years. Gradually, if you sell after 22 years, you will not pay any capital gains tax. That said, it's heavily weighted towards the end. So the first 5 years, you get no relief from paying the capital gains tax. Then you get small percentage reliefs, and then it gets higher towards the end of the period. But that's capital gains tax. But then there's the social charges as well. And again, social charges, whatever gains you make, if you're an EU citizen, you'll have to pay 7.5% if you sell within 5 years on gains you make. If you're a non-EU citizen and you sell within 5 years, on social charges, you'll have to pay 17.2%. This is, by the way, is all on top of the capital gains tax made. Now, again, if you do sell after 5 years, you'll get some relief. But to get the full relief from social charges, you'll have to sell after 30 years. So the capital gains side is 22 years. The social charges side is 30 years. I'm sure you'll agree that's a hell of a long time to have to keep a property. Now, I guess the only reason you may buy in Paris is if you go there very frequently on business and you're not bothered about yields, you're just using the place for business. You could do that. And I'm sure eventually, after many, many years, you are going to gain in Paris because of, not least because it's a major capital, it's the population density is high. But having said that, even if you don't pay any capital gains tax or social charges tax at the end, and you want to pass it down to a loved one, you're going to pay a high inheritance tax. So overall, I love Paris. It's one of my favorite cities to visit. I've been there so many times. And when I mean so many times, 30, 40, even 50 times, I can't even remember. But as far as real estate is concerned, this is definitely not a place to put your money. There are much better places to put your money, a lot cheaper and fewer taxes. If you're still interested in Paris and you want me to make a video on taxation, particularly I'm referring to the capital gains tax on gains you make and the social charges on the gains you make, I can do a separate video on that as well if you're still interested in buying in Paris. But please email me, please put comments, and if there's more than 5 to 10 requests, I will do a video on that. But that said, I'm sorry to have to say that it's not a real estate market to invest in. I will be coming up with other markets which I think you should invest in. And thanks for watching this video. Have a great day, and I'll see you very soon.